The jungle didn't call Yossi Ginsberg with a roar. It called him the way a dream calls you, soft, persistent, impossible to ignore. He was 22, restless in a way that didn't fit inside ordinary rooms. Quiet life wasn't bad exactly. It was safe, predictable. But Yossi had a private fear that safety could turn into a cage, and that one day he'd wake up older and realize he'd never met the real version of himself. So he left. He drifted through South America for months, riding buses that rattled like old bones, eating cheap street food, sleeping wherever the night found him. He chased stories the way other people chase money. In Colombia, he met a Swiss schoolteacher named Marcus. Marcus Stam's steady-eyed, thoughtful, the kind of man who could make even a chaotic map feel like a plan. They traveled together, and by the time they reached La Paz, Bolivia, their friendship had that strange quick bond travelers get, like brothers who skipped the childhood part and went straight to loyalty. And that's where the third friend appeared. Kevin was older, American, a photographer with quick hands and a grin that made danger feel like a joke. He talked about lighting and timing, about getting the shot, but there was something else under it. He wanted proof that life could still surprise him. 3 friends, 1 city, and a shared hunger for something bigger than comfort. Then came Karl. He didn't arrive like a villain in a film. He arrived like a miracle, in Austrian with a confident voice, dusty boots, and an aura that suggested he'd seen secrets no one else had earned. He claimed he could take them to a hidden indigenous village deep in the Bolivian Amazon, a place few outsiders had ever reached. A tribe, a mystery, a real edge of the world adventure. For Yossi, it felt like fate wearing a human face. They left the beaten path the next morning. A small plane carried them toward the green, toward the kind of wild that makes cities seem like a childish idea. From there, boats, muddy trails, heat that wrapped around their lungs like wet cloth. They stocked supplies in a local village near the rivers, names that sounded like spells, Tuichi, Asaraimus. The jungle closed behind them. At first, it was everything they'd imagined. Butterflies the size of palms, bird calls that sounded like laughter, sunlight pouring through leaves like stained glass. Marcus kept notes. Kevin kept taking photos. Yossi kept smiling like a man finally in the right story. But the jungle doesn't care about your dream. It doesn't hate you. It doesn't love you. It simply exists, ancient, hungry, indifferent. And slowly, the dream began to sour. Food ran low. Sweat never dried. Their clothes became second skin, and then became a problem, rubbing, rotting, collecting tiny insects that bit without mercy. Karl pushed them onward, always just a little farther, always promising that the village was near, always telling stories that sounded better than reality. Marcus started refusing food he couldn't stomach. Kevin tried to joke, but even his jokes became thinner. Yossi, the one who'd wanted this most, began to notice something unsettling. Karl's confidence wasn't the confidence of experience. It was the confidence of a man who couldn't admit he was wrong. Eventually, they turned back exhausted, hungry, scraped raw by vines and miles. Back at the river, Karl offered a new plan. If the tribe wasn't reachable on foot, they would travel by raft, ride the water deeper into the wilderness, then drift out towards civilization. He spoke of roots and rivers like he owned them. They built a crude raft with local help would lash together, hope tied down with rope. And then, one afternoon, the truth began to crack open. They reached a stretch of river where the sound changed, not loud or different, a constant thunder, as if the earth itself had developed a heartbeat. Karl suddenly revealed there was a dangerous canyon ahead, rapids, waterfalls, a nightmare of rocks. He also revealed he couldn't swim. Kevin stared at him like he'd just met a stranger. Marcus went quiet, the way calm people go quiet when they realize they're furious. Yossi felt something cold slide through his chest. A simple thought, sharp as a blade. This man brought us here without telling us the truth. The argument didn't explode. It just hardened, and the group split. Karl and Marcus decided to walk back through the jungle towards safer ground. Kevin and Yossi, stubborn, confident, or maybe just too deep to admit fear, chose to continue by raft, aiming for the distant town of Rurrenabaque. They promised to meet again later, back in La Paz, like grown men trying to pretend their lives weren't balanced on a knife. The river carried Kevin and Yossi forward. For a while, it even felt right. The raft cut through the current. The jungle slid past them like a moving wall. They laughed again, relieved, lighter, as if leaving Karl behind had removed a curse. Then the water began to speed up, not a little, enough to tighten the stomach, enough to make Kevin's grin fade. They saw the river narrow, They heard the roar return closer now, louder and raged. Paddle, Kevin shouted, and Yossi did, muscles burning, hands slipping on wet wood. The raft spun. A wave hit them like a punch from a giant, and suddenly there was no raft, only water, chaos, and the violent certainty of gravity. Yossi felt himself pulled away, yanked into the current like a loose thread. He saw Kevin's face once wide-eyed, shouting something the river swallowed. Then a wall of white water rose up, and the world flipped. He went over. For a moment there was only noise and cold and the brutal force of the river dragging him where it wanted. He slammed into something, rock or wood, pain blooming across his ribs. He surfaced, gasping, choking, swallowing river like it was fate forced down his throat. When he crawled onto the bank, the jungle stared at him in silence. Kevin was gone. The raft was gone. The path was gone. He waited, shouting Kevin's name until his voice broke. He searched the riverbank until dusk turned the trees into black teeth. He told himself Kevin had made it. He had to believe that because the alternative was too heavy to carry. That first night alone, the jungle became a different place. In daylight, it had been beautiful. At night, it was a living machine of sounds, buzzing, clicking, distant screams that could have been animals or something worse. The darkness felt thick enough to touch. Yossi huddled under leaves and tried not to imagine eyes watching him. And that was when fear began to do what fear does. It tried to convince him the jungle had a plan for him. The next days blurred into a brutal routine. Move, listen, drink, move again. He had no map, no compass, and no real survival training, only stubbornness and the animal drive to stay alive. He tried to follow the river. Rivers, he believed, led to people. Sometimes the river helped him. Sometimes it betrayed him. He slipped into mud that didn't behave, like mud bogs that grabbed his legs and refused to let go. Twice he sank deep enough to feel the jungle trying to swallow him whole. He fought his way out with panic strength, sobbing, shaking, furious at his own helplessness. Rain came like punishment. Not gentle rain, tropical storms that turned the world into a flooded mouth. The river rose. The paths disappeared. One night, water surged around him so fast he thought, this is it. This is how people vanish. He clung to roots in darkness, teeth chattering, body screaming for warmth that didn't exist. Hunger changed him. At first it was an ache, then it was a constant voice, then it was everything. He found berries and roots he didn't trust but ate anyway because hunger makes gamblers out of saints. His foot began to rot with fungus, the skin splitting, the pain sharp enough to make him limp and curse and cry. He began to talk out loud, not because he thought someone would answer, but because silence felt like death. He spoke to Kevin as if Kevin could hear him through miles of jungle. He spoke to Marcus and Karl as if they were walking just ahead, invisible but close. And when the loneliness became too much, the mind did what it always does when it runs out of comfort. It created it. Later, Yossi would say he hallucinated a woman, someone who kept him company at night, someone gentle inside a world that was not. Was she real? No, but the comfort was. And comfort can be the difference between living and lying down. Days passed, or weeks. Time in the jungle doesn't behave like time in the world. It stretches, it loops, it breaks. Yossi's thoughts became raw and simple. Water, shelter, don't stop. Then, one morning, he heard something that didn't belong. Not insects, not birds. A human sound, distant, uncertain, but real. A call. Yossi froze. His whole body turned into listening. Another call. Closer. He stumbled toward it, heart hammering so hard it hurt. He crashed through foliage, didn't care about cuts, didn't care about pain. He burst into a small clearing near the riverbank and saw figures, people moving with purpose. For a second, he didn't believe it. His brain tried to label them as another hallucination. But then one of them shouted again, and the voice hit him like a rope thrown across a canyon. They were searching for him. A rescue mission led by locals, people who knew this jungle in their bones, had come upriver. Yossi tried to speak and nothing came out but a broken sound. He lifted his arms like a man surrendering to life. They reached him, grabbed him, held him up when his legs failed. And in that moment, filthy, skeletal, shaking, Yossi realized something more terrifying than the jungle. He'd almost died without anyone ever knowing the last version of his story. He'd come here to find himself, and he had. Not as a fearless adventurer, but as a human being stripped down to the truth that courage is not the absence of fear, but the refusal to quit when fear is all you have. Later, people would ask him what the jungle taught him. They would want a neat answer, something inspirational and clean. But the jungle wasn't clean. It was mud and hunger and hallucinations and pain. It was friendship tested to breaking. It was a mysterious guide who promised a dream and delivered a nightmare. It was a river that separated men like fate. And it was the brutal miracle of being found 3 weeks after he vanished into green darkness, alive when he had every reason not to be. Somewhere out there, the jungle still exists, exactly as it was, uncaring, endless, waiting. But Yossi returned different, because when you survive the uncharted, you don't come back with the same heart. You come back with a heart that knows what it costs to keep beating and why it's worth it.